Okay, so Zach, Randy, and I worked on a project that was entitled Lake Checkups, Water Quality Tests. And this is the intent was to create a multimedia communication tool to a very targeted audience. So let me say a little bit about what we're going to talk about. First, I'm going to give you just a very brief background on what the audience is and what the objectives were for the project. Secondly, how these objectives will be achieved. Third, what's the message, and then hopefully we can summarize in 12 minutes. So what I'm going to talk about first is this first part. Who's the audience, and what are we trying to get from this project? So, as was mentioned earlier, when Kendall and Diane were talking, we're targeting this product to a particular lake community in northern Indiana, which is Lake Papakichi, which is a 179-acre non-sports lake in Syracuse, Indiana. And the reason why we're doing this is just to give you some sense of where this lake is. So this is Lake Papakichi here, which is slightly south of Wawasee. Some of you know that area in Kosciuszko County. And south of our lake is a tri-county preserve. And since we're north of the Continental Divide, the water flows north from this wetlands area into our lake. And so there's increasing concern about the water quality that's feeding into Lake Papakichi and ultimately into Wawasee. So the consequence of that is last year we set up a testing program on the lake. So we basically divided the lake into 50 GPS delineated locations with the intent of testing at these spots systematically over the number of years. And the consequence of this was the formation of some testing. Some of you, of course, are more familiar with this kind of testing than I am. But we started a program for testing the water, not only within the lake proper, but also south of the lake, that water which is like feeding into Papakichi. And so one of the things is that we can't do this ourselves. We need to recruit people in the community to help us achieve this objective of testing the lake, in a very systematic way from year to year. So our target audience then are the residents of Lake Papakichi. And also the leadership of Lake Papakichi. And what we're trying to do is to educate and to inform lake residents and leadership about modern chemical and biological methods to assess the quality of lake water, right? Because this is a new thing for our lake. We've not done this before, so we need to educate ourselves, and then we need to educate the people on the lake. And we also want to motivate these lake residents to become personally involved in the work of an organization which is sort of a subset of the management of this lake, which is called LAPSI, which is the acronym for Lake Papakichi Sustainability Initiative. So really, we have this notion of wanting to get these people engaged, right, in what we're trying to do there. And mainly to recruit and train citizen scientists. So that's the target of our project. And so now Randy will pick up from here.
The approach that we propose is what we call a complementary multimedia approach. It's three-pronged. There's been a creation of a magnet, which is being passed around. There's a creation of a trifold pamphlet, which you also have. And then there's also a website that has the greatest source of information in the fullest detail. You can look at those when they're passed around. I'm going to just talk briefly about 3 or 4 ways that you can test water to monitor it, to find out where you're at, to establish a baseline, a present condition, and then you can determine if you're being impacted or not. One of the ways that people test for turbidity or clarity of water, that's been around for ages, it's called the Secchi disc. Many of you have probably used that before. It's an 8-inch disc. It's on the left there, up in the PowerPoint. I found it interesting when I was doing a little research. Originally, it was a 12-inch disc, all white. And it was used originally in the Mediterranean Sea. This gentleman was Italian, and that's where he started his measurements, and then they customized it for limnology or lake studies. You'll see on the right there's a little picture just showing the clarity. In the middle one, it's clearer, and then on the right, it's impacted by a higher algae count, and so it's depth would not be as much. Then you do your measurements, and there's procedures to determine the algae from there. A couple interesting facts, at least I thought they were, is that you need to take these, as any measurement, any scientific measurement, you want to take it in the same manner, as close to the same time as possible, so your continuing data is something that you can compare and contrast to. Shady side of the boat between 9 and 3, they say it's even best between 10 and 2. 10 a.m., 2 o'clock, shady side of the boat. Same observer, same manner every time. The Indiana Clean Lakes program uses this device to monitor turbidity in over 80 Indiana lakes. Everybody's familiar with E. coli, Escherichia coliform, I believe is the way you pronounce it. Contact with humans can cause discomfort or illness. The lakes that do have high levels are unsafe for human activities. This little plate shows you how they look at it under the microscope, and then they count those and get a number. The main source of E. coli contamination is from failing septic tanks. A lot of people spoke on septics. This is what I found. Also, feces from waterfowl and other water life can contribute, along with places that maybe have confined feeding operations that are poorly managed. Large-scale agriculture could be a problem too. There's standards that are set and convenient and simple tests. The Department of Health has a list of certified labs. Purdue Extension has several publications. You'll find a name you're familiar with on many of those, and that's Jane. She's written many articles and bulletins about this subject. Quickly, I'll wrap up on my segment here. DO and temperature, two other important indicators. Organisms need oxygen to live. Typically, anything under 3 is death to the fish. 3 to 5 is not very good, but it's survivable for a limited amount of time. 5 is survivable, but they need a 6 DO to spawn or reproduce. So that's kind of numbers. 5 to be alive, maybe is a way to think about it. Under DO, they're inversely related temperature and dissolved oxygen. The colder, typically the better, the higher the dissolved oxygen. We'll have Zach here. He'll wrap this up for us.
So I'm just going to wrap up with the last 2 parameters that they're currently testing in Papakichi, and that's nitrogen and phosphorus. These 2 were chosen obviously because they are required by all living organisms, and they're the macronutrients that are limiting in an aquatic environment. And because excessive amounts can lead to excessive algae growth, and then therefore can impair water quality for several different reasons. The primary sources of them are the fertilizers usually. Larger areas it would be agricultural, but it's been found that an acre of residential area with lawn can sometimes have higher phosphorus applications than agriculture on a per acre basis. The pertinent equipment for nitrogen and phosphorus is usually a submersible pump that you raise through that Secchi zone and collect water and then take it back to a lab, and you have to digest, and usually photospectrometry and things can tell you what your concentrations are. Again, there's state standards, national standards set for this to let you know what trophic level your lake is at and whether it's impaired or not. So we've, in any aquatic study, those are important parameters to look at, along with the ones Randy just discussed. But with this project in particular, we were looking just to inform people about these parameters, why they're being tested, what they can tell the association and other residents on the lake. And the first one is the trifold pamphlet that I think everybody got except one table, but hopefully we'll make it over there. And again, it's just explaining each of these parameters that we tested: the nitrogen, phosphorus, temperature, oxygen, turbidity, so on, because these are some of the main indicators that are easily identified and relatively easy to communicate to the rest of the general populace. And it doesn't have to be just Papakichi, but we did go ahead and make our own little logo or image to show your locality, kind of customize it. But again, each of these, is a little more detailed than what's on the magnet, which is, follows this. The magnet is kind of intended to be, this repetitive sampling of what we're doing out there, and hopefully it'll stick in people's minds if they actually use it as a magnet. Whereas kind of the brochure is maybe a one-time read, and if it sticks out to them, then maybe they'll pass it along to other people, or maybe they'll get hooked and think, oh, the oxygen is important to me as a fisherman. I really need to know what this is all about, and then maybe they'll, go to the website, look into it a little more in depth, and then maybe even look beyond the pamphlet, the magnet, and the website for Patakichi. So, the links on the website, these are going to be the detailed things. These are probably targeted for the individuals living on the lake rather than the general populace. But we're hoping that these tools will educate people and encourage them to be leaders in how to promote their water quality.